2 years ago now, our family found out from my dad that he was going to court. We didn't get very much information about it. He was an accountant, always had a very good job. He'd done a lot of community work. He said that something had gone wrong where he used to work, but he'd be coming back home. Nothing to worry about. The next day, we got a call from his solicitor later on in the day to say, I'm really sorry, your dad is in the back of a van on his way to prison.
Gosh.
Was
what
devastating.
What went through your mind when you heard that news?
It was confusing. My mum took the call and she kind of just came back into the room, and me and my brothers were there, and she just said, he's gone. And we were just in shock. We didn't know what had happened, why he'd gone to prison, what kind of state we were going to be left in. Soon after, it came out in the newspapers that he'd had a gambling addiction, he'd hidden it, he'd been stealing money from work, and that was funding the addiction. And in what we've found out since, he's got into hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of debt, remortgaged the house, pretty much bankrupted the family. But, this addiction took hold of him, and, the more he did it, the more it seemed to compound itself. He didn't ever see the light and think, I'm getting in too deep, this is too bad. It just grew and took over, I think, all of his life. His last bet actually was in the break in the court hearing on his phone.
Really? Oh my
which
gosh, was that bad?
I think just shows kind of, even then, he was thinking he could win enough money to, walk back in there and say, don't worry, I can pay it all off. It's really sad.
So you found out not from him but from the papers. Did that kind of add to the, I suppose, a kind of betrayal, feelings of betrayal, or maybe, or?
It did. I think first of all, we kind of, as a family, we didn't know anything about gambling addiction, and we were a bit sceptical. We thought, well, how can you be addicted to gambling? You either choose to play it or you don't. What we found out since is it has very similar effects to like drugs or alcohol. It affects your brain, it affects your thought processes, and once you're glued to it, that becomes your first priority. And it clearly had for him. We managed to get access to his bank statements, and that showed us that there were daily, dozens of transactions for gambling, hundreds, thousands of pounds. And he's admitted it probably went back about 30 years.
Really?
He kept it that long. And I think this was the point at which it couldn't go on.
Yeah. Audrey, I'd just like to bring you in here. So, wow, I mean, I'm speechless. Yeah, yes, it's really fine. I mean, the fact that even it was happening in the court just shows how bad it was.
Exactly. It's absolutely shocking. It's an incredibly shocking story. But what we don't always understand about addiction is no one goes out to become addicted. It is a chemical change in the brain, and that's what makes it so hard to break. It's about how we respond to positive reinforcement. When we do something positive, naturally, our brain releases dopamine, it makes us feel good. But if we feed that with whether it's a substance or a win from gambling, the amount of dopamine that's released is so much more than that would naturally be produced. And after time, it gets to a stage where you actually need more and more, and naturally you're never going to be able to achieve that sort of feeling of euphoria, so you do need to look for what is giving you that excitement, and that's how addiction can take hold. And unfortunately, because of the changes in the brain, it becomes very difficult to re-educate somebody, and it becomes a lot more about just changing their environment, trying to remove them from that situation. But especially with gambling addiction, a lot of the time people who are addicted are very, very skilled at hiding it. And
30 years, like none of the family knew, right? Well,
and he's an accountant, he's always had a very good job, so much more so he's going to be able to be skilled in hiding it. That's where a lot of the problems are. And you're absolutely right, the feeling of betrayal, when you think this has been going on for 30 years, I'm sure I should have known about it, I must have known it, I must have seen the signs. You can't help but feel that blame as well. So it's incredibly hard for the family.
And I suppose it escalated over the years because the fact that your father was stealing from the company, maybe before it was his own money, but now it's
Yeah.
It's gone on to something else. How did you actually cope as a family?
Well, first of all, back at home, there's nobody really else to take care of all the fallout from it. So my mum hasn't worked since she had kids, and I've got 2 younger brothers. So I kind of had to step up really quickly and say, okay, what is our financial situation? Are we going to keep the house? You know, kind of just making sure that we were safe. Then we started to look at the addiction and how it had unfolded. And really, I think there isn't an explanation for it. It did just snowball as it became more intense for him. And it looks like the amount of debt he had went up and up and up to the point he had to steal. And he wasn't either brave enough or didn't realise how deep in it got. And that's obviously when he turned to this criminal activity.
And when he came home, because how long was he in prison for?
He did 8 months of a 2-year sentence.
Okay.
Yeah.
When he came home, what kind of support did he have apart from the family support?
It was mainly the family, and I think that's a scary thing about gambling addiction. There isn't very much support. There's one national helpline in the country, but there's very little understanding of it. So we really had to take the lead and look after his finances, keep him on the straight and narrow.
That was a lot of pressure, though, to take on yourselves, wasn't it?
It was, but it's kind of what do you do? Do you let your family go and sink and kind of forget them for the rest of your life? You can't do that. My mum didn't want to disown him. You know, we were all very sympathetic to it.
Do what families are supposed to do, right? Just get together, which is brilliant.
I think the sad part about it is when people look at addiction, they say, oh, they're the dregs of society, these people can't control themselves, you know. And we've had a lot of that levelled at us since, you know, this story's been quite high profile. And actually people need to take time to watch today's programme and say, you know, these addictions do happen. It's not their fault. They didn't intend to become an addict.
Not as you were saying,
But, you know, it just needs to be understood more.
And tell us about the campaign that you started because of this.
Yeah, so on the back of it, I kind of turned round and the bit of kind of social entrepreneur that I am said, we need to raise awareness. We need to let other people know that this does happen. And if you've got doubts in your mind, or you can see that you might be potentially losing like your husband or someone in your family, could it be gambling? Might not be, but at least you've got it on your mind. Because it is very, very secretive. It's very easy to hide now with it being online. You know, we've looked at things the industry could do to make it safer, and we've started to educate the NHS about what it feels like to go through it. So we're trying to make waves and we're trying to make a difference. I hope that at some point we can maybe start a charity to try and help people directly. But, you know, I think for my dad as well.
And he was very active as well with the campaign and everything. What's that like now, sort of, you know, the fact that you did work together on that? And
I think it's good. I think it helps him see that there wasn't just him. Because I think going to prison, not having the opportunity to tell us, made him think, oh my God, you know, this is kind of the end of his life as well. He's never going to have the same kind of life again. He's never going to see his family. And, you know, it's not talked about very much. So for him, it's opened his eyes and he thought, you know what, there's so many people I could help by telling my story. But I think, you know, also it's helped him see that people go through problems. He tried to be the perfect dad. That's why he hid it. And, you know, so many people do that. And, you know, you don't have to be. We're not perfect.
I'm just wondering how many people are watching us now as well, Audrey, that are going through this, and it's just kept it a secret. It just feels worse. Also, we keep saying people just open up about the issues that you have, especially the men. They find it really hard to talk about stuff.
It's also that feeling, there is a feeling of shame about it because you're letting down everybody, but then there's also that feeling of, well, I don't deserve help as well, and that can be part of it. But with gambling, it can be so much worse because you have this compulsion that the next time if you win, exactly as you say, you can clear everything and you can make everything all better, but it doesn't work that way, and that's the hardest part. That's what makes gambling a little bit different, and you're absolutely right. One of the things that a lot of the NHS use in terms of diagnosis and treatment is, of course, the DSM classifications. It's in there, but under pathological gambling, and it's still not quite defined. And because of that, it can depend very much on your service and who you've got supporting you as to how well you're supported. And a lot of the time with gambling, it's very easy to say, well, The family needs to support the addict. They need to make sure that he or she's got no control of the finances, that you've got to maybe see a debt counsellor, you've got to take that responsibility. But that's incredibly hard for the family. That's
what I was saying.
Especially when they've just found out, and to find out in such a horrible way through the papers, it makes it even worse. So that's very difficult.
And until there is more help available out there, Audrey, what kind of advice would you give for family members? I know it's a difficult one. But
actually, it's to seek support yourselves and realise that you are worth having that support, because if you go down, there's no one else after that. And it's really hard because you start, the addict can even start blaming you and start saying things like, oh, well, you don't care about me because you're looking after yourself or your children or your own bit of the family. And it's kind of about understanding yourself, that you owe it to yourself to have that support network around you. And the more you are able to talk about it with other people, perhaps who are going through it, there's not going to be a definite solution, but something that they've tried may suddenly work. Having that conversation, knowing you're not alone, makes the difference. And it is about seeking support yourselves.
Definitely,
Hi, I'm Chrissy B, and my show is all about improving your mental health and being happy. Join me every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 10 p.m. on my channel Sky 203. Visit chrissybshow.tv for more information and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chrissy B Show. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chrissy B Show and on our Facebook page, The Chrissy B Show.